Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Fair YouTube video. Hopefully everybody's having a terrific Friday. Looking forward to the weekend. I know I'm looking forward to our big show tomorrow night with Rhino and Johnny Swinger, who are both currently in Impact Wrestling. Today's video is going to be about the first round of the NFL draft last night. Now, I'm not going to go over all 32 picks of the first round, but we will do the top 10 because I think everybody's going to know the majority of the top 10, if not all the top 10, because most of the time the top 10 is usually, for the most part, skill position players, and everybody knows skill position players. So we'll go over them here in just a minute, and then we'll give a few notable players that did not go in the top 10, but I do think they are worth mentioning. We'll go over them here in just a minute. But first, I wanted to say that I read a book one time on anti-gravity. It was impossible to put down. And that is your dad joke of the day. Now, I know I said a few weeks ago that we had one more thing ready for our studio, and this is it. I know you can't see it right now, but I'll show it to you later on. Oh, what the heck? Hey, Ray, what's going on, man? I'll go ahead and show it to you now. I had to get me a Clemson chair to sit in because sometimes when you sit here, if you sit here for a long time, those hard chairs with the hard backs can get kind of bad for your back. So I got me a more like an actual computer chair so I can sit back and relax some doing these videos. And I know I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I had one more thing in store, and that was it. We just had to get it in the mail and get it put together, and now it's here. So now if you see me sitting back some instead of sitting straight up, that's why, because now I can actually sit back and lean back without being against one of those hardback kitchen table chairs. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the first round of the NFL draft. Last night, of course, Aaron Rodgers tried to do typical Aaron Rodgers things and take all the attention and all the glory away from the draft and put it on him. He loves to do that. The older he gets, the more and more he likes to get the attention. He is supposedly now saying that he no longer wants to play for the Green Bay Packers and will not play for them again. But it's funny to me how you've had all year long to say that. You've had 365 calendar days and you ain't said a word. And then all of a sudden, when the NFL draft comes around, oh, you want out of Green Bay. That just shows you how much Aaron Rodgers loves the attention. But Green Bay is now saying they're going to try to work it out with him. If I was Green Bay, I wouldn't want him. I know late last year when people were saying that him and his girlfriend got engaged, I thought, well, at least one of them knows how to get a ring, because Aaron Rodgers sure don't. I used to be a big fan of Aaron Rodgers, but the longer he's in the league, the more I start to realize he's just a stat stuffer. He's about like Matthew Stafford and Matt Ryan. He's going to put up good numbers and make himself look good, but he ain't going to do a whole lot as far as winning you a bunch of games. But that's just my take on Aaron Rodgers. But on to the NFL draft. I'm just disgusted that Aaron Rodgers waited until draft day to say he wasn't happy. He could have said this when the season ended. He could have said this back in March, but no, he had to wait until the day of the draft to decide he wasn't happy. The first overall draft pick, I don't think surprised anybody. Most people predicted it to happen, but of course, sometimes people predict stuff and it does not go quite the way they plan. But Trevor Lawrence, Clemson University quarterback, was the number one overall draft pick, first player in the history of Clemson to go number one. Now, the only thing left for Clemson to do is have their first ever Heisman Trophy winner, which I don't think that'll ever happen, but maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe it will. But Trevor Lawrence going number one is the first time ever that Clemson's had the first number one overall draft pick. Number two in the draft, going to the Jets, was Zach Wilson, who also was quarterback from BYU. I kind of figured that earlier in the month when they traded Sam Darnold, it was kind of a clue that they were going to go out and get Zach Wilson. You didn't need two young quarterbacks on the same team. I just wasn't sure if it was going to be Zach Wilson or one of the other quarterbacks they took. but it was Zach Wilson. Number 3, the 49ers also drafted a quarterback, and they got Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Now, if you follow the NFL and have for a long time, you know that Carson Wentz also came from North Dakota State. So that's the second North Dakota State quarterback taken high in the draft in the last few years. Number 4, the Falcons took Kyle Pitts from Florida, which Kyle Pitts is an amazing, amazing player. But if the Falcons don't upgrade their defense and upgrade their offensive line, then drafting Kyle Pitts didn't really do them any good, but he is a good player. And number 5 last night taken by the Bengals was Jamar Chase, the wide receiver from LSU. So now they're trying to get Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, 2 teammates on the same team. Hopefully they can have some of the same success with the Bengals that they had when they were at LSU. And number 6, the Miami Dolphins took Jalen Waddle, wide receiver from Alabama. And number 7 was the first skill player not being a skill player that was drafted. The first 6 picks were all skill players. The number 7 pick, Detroit picked Penei Sewell, who is an offensive tackle from Oregon. So the first 6 picks were quarterbacks, tight ends, and receivers. The number 7, Detroit drafted Penei Sewell from Oregon. And then the Panthers took J.C. Horn from the University of South Carolina Gamecocks. He was a cornerback. So after 6 skill players taken, you had back-to-back non-skill players, with Detroit taking Oregon offensive tackle Penei Sewell and the Panthers taking Gamecock cornerback J.C. Horn. And the 9th pick, the Detroit Lions drafted Patrick Surtain from Alabama. And the final top 10 draft pick, the Eagles drafted Devontae Smith from Alabama. So if you look, Alabama had Jalen Waddle, Patrick Surtain, and Devontae Smith. So 3 of the top 10 players came from the University of Alabama. And people want to know why they keep winning national championships. Well, that's your reason right there. 3 of the top 10 picks came from the University of Alabama, and they do that about every year, and they'll probably do it again next year. And just outside of the top 10, Justin Fields is going to the Bears. He was drafted number 11. The Eagles and Bears actually swapped draft picks. Otherwise, Justin Fields may have also went in the top 10, but he is going number 11. And number 15, another University of Alabama player, quarterback Mac Jones, was drafted by the New England Patriots. And then 2 guys that I'm going to mention, everybody knows who they are, and I'm only going to mention them because they're running backs, because I feel like it shows how talented they really are. Because this day and time, running backs really don't get the ball much. It's so much of a passing league now, and it's so much about passing and quarterbacks putting up stats and teams trying to score points that running backs now get devalued. And most of them, by the time they're 30, are out of the league. And most good running backs, if you get 10 to 12 carries a game, you're doing good. Whereas it used to be a good running back got 25 or 30 carries a game. But the game now is all about passing. So I think both of these guys going in the first round, even though they weren't top 10, they still both went in the first round. And I think that just goes to show you how talented they are. Had they came out of the draft 10, 12 years ago, they'd probably both be in the top 10, if not the top 5. And that's Alabama running back Najee Harris and Clemson running back Travis Etienne. Najee Harris is going to Pittsburgh, and Travis Etienne is going to the Jaguars. So the Jaguars drafted the Clemson back, Travis Etienne, at running back, and they're going to try to have the same success with them in the NFL that Clemson had with them in college. Of course, the Jags got a long way to go, but getting those 2 players is certainly helpful. It can't hurt you to have those 2 guys in the backfield, but they need some major help around them. But I do think with Urban Meyer coming in, I think they'll improve this year to 5-6 wins, which would be a whole lot better than what they were last year, but they're still not a playoff team. And it's actually the 6th time in 7 years, going back to 2015, that 2 Clemson players have been drafted by the same team in the first round. The only time it didn't happen, I believe, was 2018. But every other year since 2015, there's been two Clemson players that have been taken by the same team in the first round. And it just goes to show you what Dabo Swinney is doing at Clemson, because I recall when I first started watching football back in the mid to late 90s, you'd have the NFL draft, and Clemson wouldn't have one player that was even drafted. But now, not only do they have players drafted, they have guys drafted in the first round. And like I said earlier, Trevor Lawrence last night going number one is the first Clemson player to ever be taken number one. Now the only thing Clemson needs to do is have somebody win the Heisman Trophy. But like I said earlier, I don't expect that to ever happen. I'd like to see it, but I don't think it will. If you have any thoughts on the NFL draft last night, maybe some players I didn't mention, I wasn't going to go through the entire first round, just top 10, because most of the time, most years, the top 10 players everybody's heard of. And most of the time, most years, top 10 players are always really, really, really good. Every once in a while, there's a bust, but not very often. So I figured I would go ahead and come on here and just give you the top 10 and see if anybody has any thoughts about their team, whoever your team is. And we may come back one day next week and talk about maybe some other name players, even though they're not going to be in the first round, at least, who they are, whether it's a team they play for or something they've done great in college, or maybe you like a certain team and they drafted that certain player that you wanted and you're happy about it. I don't know. It all depends on what kind of reaction and response I get from you people out there in YouTube Nation. But until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in life, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of three. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.